Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Construction Work Health webinar series. My name is Deirdre Rutherford, and I am the facilitator for today's webinar. I am a Principal Advisor in the Ergonomics Unit here at WHSQ. The inaugural Construction Work Health Forum was held in March earlier this year. The forum was well attended and, more importantly, very well received by industry. We have created this webinar series based on some of the most popular presentations and workshops on the day, so that they may be shared with a broader audience than those who were able to attend the forum. However, if you were able to attend on the day, I'm sure you will enjoy seeing the presentation again. We are fortunate to have a number of presenters from the forum, and they have kindly made themselves available to present again, and we thank them all very much for doing so. This 5-part series covers a range of topic areas. These are Good, Better, Best, Applying Good Work Design Principles to Maximise Health and Wellbeing, presented by Dr. Rebecca Loudon. Engaging Your Workforce, presented by Daniel Hamadal. Silica, Managing the Risks, presented by our own Brad Guidance. Alert at Work, a practical approach to identifying and managing workplace fatigue risks, presented by Jenny Krasny. And finally, Who is at risk of too much sitting in construction, presented by Dr. Nick Gilson. Registration for the remaining webinars is still open. The registration links are available on the WorkSafe website on the What's On page. We do anticipate that today's session will take approximately 45 minutes, and a recording of the webinar will be made available on the WorkSafe website in a couple of weeks. We encourage you to share this with your colleagues and networks. The presentation itself should take about 30 minutes and will be followed by a short Q&A session. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them into the chat box and select Send to all panelists, or type your question through the Q&A chat box. We will try and get through as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Today's presentation is entitled Engaging Your Workforce, and I would now like to introduce you to today's presenter, Daniel Hamadal. After an initial career as a commercial pilot, Daniel decided to study psychology. He has worked as an accident investigator with the Swedish Civil Aviation Administration and as a human factors consultant with DDAL in France, and as a safety innovation leader in Australian engineering, construction and mining businesses. Daniel is the founder of www.safetydifferently.com and the Director of Safety Innovation, Art of Work. His goal is to help organisations to find new and more functional ways to improve safety. I'll now hand you over to Daniel to get us started on today's webinar.
Thank you, Deirdre. It is a pleasure to be here and to talk with you again about engaging with people for high performance. I would like to start with a question which I normally ask when I run this presentation, and that is, what is safety? How can we know that we are safe? Are you safe right now? And how can you know that you are safe indeed? When I ask those type of questions, I often get very vague answers. Very few organizations have actually defined what they mean by safety, and that is a little bit surprising, given that they actually have safety departments, safety professionals, and they report safety in their annual reports. Up on this slide, I have put up some of the most common words that you can hear when people talk about safety, and this seems to be what people associate with safety. On the left, we have all the things that we do not want to have, and they are unwanted outcomes. There are harms, accidents, incidents, illnesses, injuries, deaths, and lost time incidents, and so on. So that's, safety is connected to those unwanted aspects. So when we talk about safety, we talk a lot about the stuff that we do not want to happen. In the middle, we have words that are associated with that, but they're more the triggers or the causes or assumed causes of those things, like hazards and dangers and risks and shortcuts and workarounds. And essentially, we have more of the things that we do not want to happen. So when we talk about safety, we talk about things that we do not want to happen, and we talk more about the things that we do not want to happen. And then we sprinkle on top of that a set of relatively unsexy control mechanisms to make sure that people don't end up in anywhere near either those causes or the unwanted outcomes. I find safety increasingly an incredibly boring, tedious, and negative topic with a culture that is dreadfully heavy to deal with quite often. So this is the world of safety. This is the words of safety, if you will. And then we ask people to be switched on and to be engaged with safety. And this is not an easy sell. For a long time, many organizations have based their safety interventions and safety program on the idea that they can improve or achieve safety by focusing on what goes wrong, by preventing anything from going wrong. Then they will arrive into the promised land where nothing bad happens. So we should have a negative focus. Right? But today I want to argue and I want to explain how organizations and practitioners can and actually should engage with normal work, things that go right, whatever that means, and we will look a bit at that today. Because if we don't do this, we risk being stuck in a reactive, negative, and tedious culture, and we're going to have increasingly large problems in engaging our people in creating successful workplaces. So let's start by looking at a concrete example. Why do people come to work? Why do you come to work? Do you come to work to be safe? Most of the time people come to work in order to do work, to carry out a job. Yet organizations continue to believe that safety will prevail if you only stop bad things from happening. Sort of an anti-goal of why people come to work. I believe that we can turn this around. Safety can and should be about enabling people to achieve great outcomes across varying conditions. To do this, however, we need to change the lens through which we understand how work happens, what happens at work, and also what safety is. And we need to start asking a different set of questions with which we can engage our workforce. So look at this worker in this picture. He is tightening a nut onto a bolt to fasten a beam. To increase the torque, he has put a piece of pipe on a spanner and created what is commonly called a cheetah bar. When I saw this, he at one stage squatted down and put his back under the pipe and stood up and pushed the piece of pipe up as to really get some serious torque. Now, we can, of course, ask if this is a safe practice. I don't think it is. I don't think the spanner has been designed to carry any random load like that. There might be all kinds of pinch points in the attachment between the piece of pipe and the spanner, and maybe other things that can go wrong as well. And I know that some organizations have actually banned solutions such as these from their sites, but not everyone. It's sort of in that gray zone. But instead of looking at this as either safe or unsafe and just then draw a line in the sand, let's start to ask, why are people doing this? Right? Is it because they are risk takers, or they are bad workers, or that they don't care about safety? I don't think that's the case. I believe that people do this because they want to be successful, because they are indeed committed to the organization, to project delivery. They want their teammates and colleagues to be productive and have successful outcomes. But I also believe that people do this because at the time there's probably no better solution available to them, or they can't get access to it. And this is the problem, that people will work with whatever you provide them with to get the job done. Now, if we would engage with this guy and ask him what went wrong today, you probably wouldn't hear about this because nothing goes wrong here. You could potentially hear it if it would slip off and hit him in the face and he would break a few teeth or something like that. But even if you asked about, did you were exposed to any dangers today, you're quite unlikely to capture this. But I think if we would tweak the question and start asking about normal work, we stand a better chance to capture these things. We could, for example, ask him about, what was frustrating today? What was physically challenging? Or what ideas do you have how we can make your job easier or more productive? then we can capture these sensitivities that people are exposed to and how they overcome challenges that they have in the workplace. And then we can have a discussion about whether that is good and what we can do to support people. The point I'm trying to make here is that successful outcomes are infinitely more complicated than just stopping unwanted outcomes. Safety is not a binary thing. It happens along a continuum. And unless you try to understand what people want to achieve, you're going to be reactive and stuck in a reactive mode in how you engage with people. But if you engage with what people try to achieve and you look at what the ways they go about that, you're more likely to capture sensitivities, inefficiencies, and dependencies that are in the workplace. And then you can boost whatever people rely on to achieve success. And that will move you away from safety events and move you towards greater productivity, efficiency, well-being. Now, there is always a gap between what is provided by organization and the work that needs to be done. This quote from Henry Petrosky summarizes this as a relative ignorance about what is actually going on. And this is the case because when we design something, and this could be a tool, it can be a procedure, it could be a checklist, that thing is generic. Now, in reality, it needs to be specific, and there's always a little bit of a gap between the generic and the specific. This gap can be small and insignificant, and sometimes it doesn't really present a problem, but sometimes it's large and it creates a challenge for people to overcome. So I think that this is a really important task for organization, and I think safety professionals in particular have a beautiful position to do this, to chart, to assess, and to understand the gap, to understand ignorance, what we don't know about ourselves as an organization. So before I describe some ways that people and organizations can do this, where they can chart and understand what's going on, let's look at some more examples of how this gap is playing out in practice. You probably won't find a procedure that tells people to find a random piece of wooden block and some wannabe shims to support a piece of pipe when doing this maintenance task. But this is likely to happen if you as an organization have not provided a better tool, because the work needs to get done. There's a purpose that people come to work to fulfill. So if you as an organization do not have a practice of asking about, these solutions and what people do to overcome and how they create success, chances are that you will never know about these things until it's too late. There's a beautiful saying, which is that people finish the design, and by design, this is design with a small d. They take things to its completion. They look at the drawings and then they go the extra mile, because that is what is needed to make work happen. This operators panel has had some modifications done to it after it was installed. If you look at the top of it and also sort of underneath that LCD display, you can see that they put some stickers or labels. They printed stickers and labels and put them on there with instructions. And if you look at the bottom where you see the red and the green buttons, you can see that someone has written little instructions or a piece of text next to the buttons. The stickers and the little text there, that's effectively an operating manual. That is telling people, that is supporting people what to do about this. In this particular case, which I investigated following an accident, I found a manual, the actual written down manual from the manufacturer. Now this manual was written in German, and this was in central Queensland, right? Where people in general do not speak German. But it didn't really matter that it was written in German, because this was also found in one of the manager's drawers, far away from this operator's panel. As a consequence, people had to figure things out, and they had to learn from their mistakes, and they handed over the knowledge to their colleagues in this fashion by putting the instruction immediately on the operating panel. There was also one time where one of the operators of this panel squatted down, and he put his hands around the LCD display to shield out any glare from the sun, so he could really see the colors of the display. Again, people finish the design, and they do this every day on every site in so many different ways. And that creates sensitivities, and it exposes our people to carry the load, and it can find its way into their bodies and put stress on muscles and bones and whatever, but also on their psychology of the workplace and create stress. But people save the day every day in so many different ways. People are the solution, but we need to engage with them as if they are the solution and find out what they do. And if you only go out there and look for hazard and controls, you're not going to find this. This is a different focus, right? But this is also where safety problems grow, and you can have accidents coming from this because you don't know about this, and these solutions that they come up with may be more sensitive than something that you have used your collective wisdom from engineers and safety professionals and occupational hygienists and other groups. If you want to better understand where your organization can support your people and find to more, move towards more stable solutions, look for these traces of where people have bridged the gap on their own. Look for differences between what is engineered and what looks homemade. In the previous example I had with the guy with the spanner and the cheetah bar, the spanner was nice and shiny and looked very engineered, whereas the piece of pipe was rugged and had pieces of paint on it, right? Those are the traces. You can see things that are tied together. You can really spot quite easily when things are homemade. Don't see that as a deviation or something you need to ban. See that as a clue, as an entry point for you to understand or to start exploring what is going on in your organization. Now, here's another trace. It's what do you call these? A zip band, a cable tie that has been attached to a handrail running next to a small railroad. When I saw this, I thought that it looked conspicuous. Right? Again, it was like seeing the spanner and the piece of pipe. So I started asking around, now, what is the function of this piece of plastic sticking out here? Now you can see in the background of the photo that there's a train. So I spoke with the driver of that train, and he proudly explained to me that he used it as a marker when parking the train. The challenge for the driver was that he could more or less see just straight ahead. There was a video camera and a little display in the driver's cabin that showed him what went on behind the train, but the task for him when parking the train was to line it up with a tipping station right next to the train. So he needed to have information where he was sideways, and he couldn't see that from the driver's cabin. So he had put this little marker on the handrail. And he said, when I park the train, I'm going to park it so the marker hits the third row of the safety net to the driver's cabin. So he did. Now, I don't know if this has any safety implication whatsoever. But I think the moral of this story and the other stories is that people will achieve success. They will achieve the purpose that they come there for. That is their job, and they will do so in remarkable ways, in ingenious ways, because people are amazing. Right? And we have a chance to work with people in this. And I guess my point is that this is not a choice. You cannot choose if this is going to go on or not, because it happens every day, every site, many times over, in small and large qualities, in insignificant qualities, and things that are really dangerous and might be innovative that can help lots of other people. It's just this gray area that organizations don't know about. So the choice is not whether to allow this to go on. The choice is whether you want to know about this or not. And if you do want to know about it, and then I think I've provided a pretty compelling case why you should know about it, you need to start asking a different set of questions. So work with people. Set them up for success. Ask them where the sensitivities are, where the organization has failed to set them up for success. Ask them about their frustrations, what's pissing them off. Right? Ask them the things that they have to tolerate, or the ideas they have on how they can support people. And we're going to look at some really good questions that I have found very useful, so you can learn from normal work rather than waiting for a failure to happen. Before we do so, I just want to link this back to some theoretical musings around this. So the thing about success is that Of course, we need our work to be based on tested and validated principles, best standards, things that we have learned in the past as reliable ways of going about work. These are things that you can read about in a book. These are concepts or ideas. They are always abstract to some degree, but we need them. We need to base our success on these things. We cannot forget about them and just stand naked in the mud and hope that things will work out. But when doing things in reality, when implementing things, when building things, everything is unique. Every setting is unique. Every group of people coming together is unique. The historical trajectory of that particular organization carrying out the work is unique. You can never read about the uniqueness in a book. You have to create that knowledge in a unique setting. So what you're dealing with here is two different spheres of expertise. You have the conceptual, which you normally have people who are in managerial positions where they've read stuff in books and they're trained and they know about that sort of knowledge. But then you have the people with the most intimate understanding about work conditions on the other side. And unless you can get these two sides to talk to each other and create a good meeting point about the challenges that happen in the translation of the conceptual to the contextual, you're going to be behind. In safety, unfortunately, we've been very good in sort of telling and not so good in asking or listening. So I think there's an opportunity for us to turn this equation around, or even make it a bit more balanced. I guess that's my point. Now, how can we do this in practice? Well, I today want to share three different ways. And the first way is to just look at, to make use of something you already have, and that is your safety observations or your safety walks when you go out and you just look for things. And my encouragement in that space would be to expand the focus that you already have when you do site visits or safety walks. Go beyond and outside checklists and hazard hunting. Look for the traces of homemade solutions. See them not as deviations, but as a starting point for further assessment and understanding. And then you invite more and more people into the discussion about what is happening here, what can be done about it, how can we support you further in making this an even better solution. Look for the good outcomes rather than just stopping bad outcomes. Right? This also links into the next one, which I call explorative conversation. Also very easy, I think, that anyone can implement. If you think about, well, one example would be to look at your executive safety walks, for example. Right? Don't have your CEOs and the other executive managers checking the expiry date of the first aid kits or the fire extinguishers. Right? It's a waste of time and a missed opportunity. Lots of other people can do that. Right? Instead, you should pay interest, pay attention to the work that people do. Let them tell the stories. Let them tell you about their experience, about what it's like to work in a particular site. Ask open-ended questions about difficulties and frustrations, roadblocks, innovations, ideas, dependencies, and even strengths. Right? And then you do something with that information. You spread good practice, you address sensitivities, you remove roadblocks and bottlenecks, right? And you take steps to address and to learn and become better. That way, you need to engage with work even before it has become a safety issue. You need to be committed to creating a successful workplace. Now, the third option, which I will explain in a few slides, is to have a more in-depth, structured or systematic approach. And we call that a collaborative improvement or collective improvement. But before we go into that, let's look a bit about, let's look at the questions that you can use when you go out and you do these explorative conversations. Here are some of the questions that I've used successfully over time. My my most used question is probably the top one here. When is your work difficult? Can you tell me about a time? And people might say, my supervisor is really annoying. That is difficult for me. You can't really do much with that information, but keep digging and ask people to tell you about a time when work was difficult. Well, 2 weeks ago, I was doing this type of work, and he just kept checking me every 2 minutes, and it was drip feeding information. My work was disorganized and disrupted all the time. And then you understand what that is, right? And then you can explore who's a good supervisor? What do they do? And you can start having a discussion around that. The second question is a really good engagement question that never fails. You ask people, what if you could have $50,000 to make this a better place to work, a more successful place to work for you and your colleagues? How would you invest them? And then people will say, normally they give you a very short answer. They'll say, better uniforms, more tools, do something around the drawings, maybe have a barbecue. Whatever people say, that is your starting point. You say, okay, you said barbecue. Why do you say barbecue? What's the problem a barbecue is going to fix? And then it will say, well, at the moment, the team spirit is really down the drain because we have all these contractors coming in and taking our work, and we don't really trust each other anymore. If it's something around tools, we don't have the right tools or not enough tools. Whatever it is, this question will guide the discussion towards the sensitivities, where people feel that, there's a bit of stress here. We need to invest in this space. What conditions do you have to tolerate here? That is really a good question to broaden the discussion, start talking about nuisances in the workplace like noise and dust and humidity and rain and mud and things like that. Now, the fourth question, what solutions have you come up with that makes your work more effective, safer, productive? It's a smart way to start talking about workarounds, if you will. Right? What do you do to overcome the challenges? What is it that we don't know about? But ask about them as something positive, as people have made a contribution. And then you engage with that and see how we can make that better. Now, the next question, what procedure causes the most grief? Or if we even tweak that question to ask, how do the procedures support you in your work? That is a really good way to start approaching the topic of shortcuts. But I never ask about shortcuts because they're a very sensitive topic. People will just shut down and they will not engage with it. But let's complain about the procedures instead of complaining about behavior. That way you can see where the gap is and you can understand how the procedures can support your people and how they sometimes miss the point of what is actually going on at work. They will reveal important information. The next question is also a little bit about procedure, but what is the most stupid thing you have to do around here? It's a great question where you can start decluttering your system and see where you have completely eroded respect for certain things, normally for very good reasons. Now, the bottom question here, what used to happen here but doesn't happen anymore? That is a good question to engage with change, to see what has been helpful changes for people and things that they appreciate, or if things are going the wrong way, you start capturing things that have changed, either in the good or the bad way, and it brings out a lot of, as you can see, it's an open question. You have no idea what's going to come out of it. And it's people know what changes have happened in the last 2 years and so on. So all these are good practical questions that you can use when you go out. So collective improvements is an initiative that we run at AutoWork with various organizations, and we have this type of focus that we've just been talking about. And we do it in a structured way, and it happens in 3 stages. The first step is to engage with employees at all levels of a project. We have separate focus groups for frontline employees, for supervisors, and for managers. And we explore different topics, and we ask the type of questions you saw on the previous slides. And we really try to capture examples of work, things that have happened, and conditions that are out there. And then we collect those examples, we record the conversations, and we identify those examples, and we remove any type of information that can be used to identify who said what. We're not interested in people's performance. We're interested in evaluating what kind of workplace is this. What is it like to work here? And then we come back and we do collaborative analysis where we get the organization to analyze, to pinpoint the challenges and where they can improve things. And then, of course, we implement something where you do something with the information. So here's a couple of examples of the type of examples that we get from this type. The first one here is from a transport organization. There was a supervisor said, I had FedEx, the other coordinator had Star Trek. Both had half a crew each. FedEx met deadline by 30 seconds. It was just a mad rush, push, sweat, scream just to get the goods out. Severely undermanned, not enough leading hands, only one leading hand on shift every night. So this is what an example can look like, just a short story like this. Right? But it engages the entire organization in a very different way compared with having a number, whether you were on time or not in that particular freight delivery. And it engages the organization to analyze. So I ask people, what is impacting performance here in this example? And they start talking about manpower, and how tasks are sometimes coming in an unpredictable kind of way. Here's another example that came from a construction site. And the story here was there was a structure that was going to be built repeatedly 6 times, 6 different locations, but the same drawings. But somehow there were multiple drawings, and people had to create their own single source of truth that they could rely on. And this was an electrician who I spoke with, and he was one of very few people who traveled between different sites. So he had access to different ways of putting this identical buildings together. So he created that on his phone, a single source of truth, and he started spreading that. Of course, this is globally a really bad solution for any construction site like this. But for him, he needed to do that to get the job done. People create solutions whether you want it or not. You just need to be involved and know what is going on. That is your best chance to create a better workplace. Now, every focus group generates about 20 to 40 examples. I have lots of examples after that. And then I go back and I put every example, I print them out on an A4 sheet and put them up on the wall, and I invite various, a cross-section of the organization to come together to analyze this. So they read the examples, they talk, and they combine people in a new way. What is going on here? What is impacting performance? And then they define the key challenges for the organization. And normally, the findings, the issues that people identify are not very breathtaking. It's not something you didn't know about. It's just normal work, really. But when you read the examples and how it's all playing out, you have a very different understanding, and it hits you in the belly in a different way, right? So it's just normal work, and you have to do something about this. You can see how different sides gravitate towards different issues. And then, of course, you have to do something with it. And this is where we create a site improvement team, where we ask frontline leaders or frontline people to speak up about their ideas and their solutions that they would like to see. And this is really important because traditionally we've had leaders who implement their solutions and they impose that on work. But if people are allowed to create their own solutions under the supervision, under the approval of managers and so on, they can create solutions that they care about, and you start having a care factor at work. This is really critical if you want to have sustainable solutions in your organization. Now, the benefits of doing this, I can always promise that you will have an increased understanding of project complexities. Right? It will automatically improve communication and participation or engagement. And you will have a chance to improve employee satisfaction and morale by having the viewpoints taken seriously. It's a bit tricky. The risk here is if you don't do anything with the information, it's going to be quite insulting to the people who spoke up. Say, thank you, we now know that you're suffering every day, we're not going to do anything about it. Right? You're essentially going to end up worse off than if you didn't do this. So it comes with a risk, and you have to be committed to seeing this through. But of course, you will also have an increased probability of innovative solutions that can improve efficiency, productivity, and safety, and move people away from where bad things happen towards more positive outcomes. If you want to know more about this, go to our website, ourwork.solutions. We're running a masterclass on Friday and next week, and you should come and you can learn about how to do this in practice yourself. I think we're running out of time. Do we have any questions, Deirdre?
Thank you, Daniel. Your presentation highlights the effectiveness of a participative approach where workers are actively engaged in identifying the issues, sensitivities, and collaboratively coming up with solutions. And thank you for the questions that are coming through. If you do have a question, now is your chance to ask Daniel, so please send your questions through. We'll attempt to get through as many as we can with the time we have left. And the first question to Daniel: how do you get the initial buy-in from the executive level, appreciating that this approach is resource intensive in the startup stages?
Good question. I'm not sure how the magic happens, but I know when it happens. It normally happens after there's been an incident and they realize that we actually don't know what is going on this side. We need a new way to engage with our people, to hear them out about all the stuff that is going on under the radar and so on. And they recognize that this is a great way of doing it, and they can also improve engagement. And I really try to sell those benefit points that I had on the previous slide, saying that this is a new way for you to do work, right? And if you pull this off, you're going to go from the worst performer to being the star of the class. And I also push that you need to be committed to the whole process. You cannot just say we're going to listen to people, then do nothing about it. So I tried to say that this is an engagement which goes beyond anything that you've done before. I undersell it and make it difficult for them, if anything. And they understand that this is important. This is their chance to show their commitment to their people.
Thanks, Daniel. And another question. How do you tackle the different communication engagement styles of the managers who will be a part of implementing this engagement approach?
Yes, as you so delicately didn't put it, everyone is not a great communicator. But I think everyone can be. I know that some people really don't want to have social engagement with people. So first of all, if you don't want to go out and talk to people, maybe you shouldn't be a leader in that role, right? But if you do want to go out, there's a number of things you can do to get better at this. First of all, you need to understand that you don't have all the answers. You need something from your people, right? So that is, part of what I've been trying to do here today, to explain why we need to ask questions. The second thing is, of course, you need to have questions to ask and understand what is a good question. Don't ask yes or no questions. Don't ask why questions. Have these open-ended questions that engages people rather than put them on the defense. And three, you need to know how to listen. It's one thing to ask questions, but if you don't know how to listen, it's not going to make a difference whatsoever.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Daniel. We have another question. Is there a particular way or ways you've found successful to get employers to offer up solutions? Bad experience often stops people from speaking up.
Yes, that is so accurate, that bad past experience stop people from speaking up. But the rule of thumb seems to be that people try to speak up 3 times. If nothing gets done, they will stop speaking up. And why would they? It's, as I said, insulting if nothing gets done about things. And there are all kinds of stupid mechanisms that will deteriorate. So I do ask, what happens when you speak up? When have you seen someone tell it straight? And what happened to that person? Right? It's a little bit like a broken record when you start engaging with that, and people will talk about that over and over again. So you really have to sort of try to move away from that, and you can start talking about the future. Okay, we understand that did not work. Right? Now, what are the opportunities? What should we be focusing on now? How can you help us understand where we should invest? Let's work together on this. Right? So admit and embrace that everything has not been perfect, but that we still have a chance because the future is unwritten and we can create it together. That's how I would go about it. Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel. And another one linking back to that management buy-in. How do you encourage an aloof leader to accept that safety accountability?
I don't know really. I haven't had this problem. I personally think that everyone wants to be safe, and they want their workplaces to be safe. No one wants to see people injured, and it might be a trick to get that leader to see the benefits of safety and how that is actually going to help him to deliver better productivity, efficiency, well-being, and be successful. That safety is actually an outcome of all those things where you manage your project well. Safety is not something you can be committed to in isolation apart from managing your work well. So it's part of being a good manager is to manage that well as the way you manage work. So I really tried to spread safety out as being part of normal work. That's how I would do it. I don't know if it's particularly effective. I have had very little experience with aloof leaders in that space, so unfortunately I cannot give you a better answer on that today.
Thanks, Daniel. Great insights into a wonderful engagement approach. Well, unfortunately, we're now out of time. We have had a number of questions that we weren't able to get to today. We will endeavour to reply to you via email in the next couple of days. And thank you, Daniel, so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule to present to us. We sincerely thank you for doing so. I'm sure that everyone would agree that your presentation was insightful and gave us a lot to think about. Thank you all once again for participating in this webinar, and we remind you to register as soon as you can for the remaining webinars in this Construction Work Health series. Your feedback is always valuable for us, so please take 30 seconds to complete the survey that will pop up once the webinar is over. Thank you all once again, and goodbye.